Hey y'all, this is David, the George Photographer, and today I have the Fuji XT3. And what I want to do is tell you my thoughts about this camera after having it for over a year and using it pretty much exclusively. Let's jump right into this. I've had this camera for over a year now, and I've used it pretty much exclusively for that period of time. I've used my D810 some along the way, and as of recently I got that Z6 and I've used it a few times around Christmas, but by and large all my street photos I've shot with this. I took it on trips around the world. I've been to Israel with this camera. I've been to Hawaii with this camera. I've been to like Pennsylvania and Florida and just, you know, a plethora of locations. The camera has performed extremely well. I've tried different setups. I've tried different lenses. I've tried manual lenses. This is the only autofocus lens I have, but I really like this little lens. It works so well. It hasn't motivated me to buy a different lens at this point. Now this camera is no worse for wear. There is a little bit of wear on the silver paint on the top of the camera. You're starting to see it here and there on the corners. This is like a plastic molding and they've painted it silver to give it that kind of chrome brass look, but it's painted silver over plastic. It's held up actually surprisingly well to be from the deserts of the Middle East to the mountains of Hawaii. It's done really well. The ergonomics of this camera are actually really good. The only reason I like the ergonomics so well is because the battery grip adds significantly to the front handle of the camera and fills the camera properly in my hand. Plus it gives you that big grip on the bottom and it allows me to carry it inverted. You know, there's lots of value in the battery grip. It really does bring a lot to this camera. For me, the camera would almost be too small without the battery grip. One thing I like about the XT3 is I can run my vintage glass on it. With the vintage lenses, it opens up a whole world of opportunities for me to just experiment. I really love using the vintage lenses. It gives the camera a very distinct look in the images. They're really inexpensive and they work really well. And especially with focus peaking and focus magnification, they're easy to use. They really are easy to use. As of late, I've started using the Fuji 16 to 55. As of late, I've started using the 18 to 55 millimeter Fuji lens that come with the camera, the kit lens, and the kit lens works really well. It was almost the only lens I used on the whole trip to Israel. It just works so well. Its autofocus is silent and it's pretty uncanny how good it works. Now I don't use like that whole matrix detect autofocus or whatever. I've got it blocked off to a square that's, I don't know how big you consider it. Looks like on the back screen it's about 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. And I just move it around with the joystick. I mean, maybe you can see it. If I block out the screen, you can see that little square on there. And I just run that little square around and decide where I'm going to focus based on that. I really do enjoy using it. But for the most part, most of mine is with manual focus, and I use the focus magnification and then I use focus peaking. And with those two things combined, I normally never miss focus, other than, you know, like a fleeting moment. You just got to take your chances and try to get it. But the most part, autofocus, from what I've seen, works perfectly. Now, I do have a few complaints about this camera, all right? One of them is this little mode selector. This selects single shutter, continuous low, continuous high, double exposure, video. That little selector switch is a sub-level under the ISO knob. You got locks on your ISO and your shutter speed. But occasionally, right now it's not doing it. But this morning, I have this video of the mode dial sticks. And as you turn the ISO, it'll shift the condition that the camera's in from single to double exposure. And a couple of times that has messed me up. You don't realize what it's doing, and it'll be taking a double exposure, and you know, and it's telling you compose and fire your second frame, and you're like, what? Or it doesn't do anything at all, or it doesn't focus because it's doing something weird, or it takes 8 photos because you held down the shutter button too long. It's not world ending, but if I was using this camera professionally, that would be a problem. You don't want it changing modes unexpectedly. But yeah, there's like something between the ball detent, between this knob and this knob, that occasionally it'll bind and it'll drag that little sub knob around with it. The other complaint is this little rubber eye cup. I actually keep, well, this one's actually coming off now. I'll show you. They're replaceable, fortunately. But this, see how it's pulling off right there in that corner? It gets hung on just the least little thing, and it'll pull this rubber coating off of the plastic frame. And the frame is a two-piece affair, and they're sandwiching this rubber cup in between those two pieces of plastic. So you got to get a little tiny Phillips screwdriver, take these screws out, take the subframe off, pull the little rubber thing back around it, put it all back together. And once it pulls it out once, it gets real easy. As I showed you, it just snaps right off now, as you can see. And I keep spares, because I've done had one of these pull completely off. Like I swiped it across the camera bag or something, and it just peeled it right off. Those things are kind of flimsy. You know, it's not the end of the world, and it's an accessory on the camera, but I don't like how that thing works. Like I said, I keep spares in the camera bag. Anything above ISO 6400 on this ISO dial is pretty much worthless, unless you're just doing artistic photos and you don't mind the ISO noise / blur that it produces. The images get so noisy above 6400 that they almost look out of focus. I'm not real big on that, so I try not to go over 3200 with this camera. I will shoot at 6400 at times. It doesn't like a super low light performance machine. It just really isn't. The next thing is, it's kind of minor, but it's the layout location. This button is really close to this little bump that you ride your thumb on, because when you hold the camera, it sits against your thumb and it just kind of rides there. And to reach that button, your thumb naturally lands on this mode dial, and I've got back button focus assigned to this button. This is the AFL, autofocus lock button, and so it's right above that little detent or knob or protrusion or whatever you want to call it. So I've got back button focus assigned to that and the click button on the mode dial. So if I'm in a hurry and I just reach up and hit one of them two will focus. So I doubled down on it when I kept missing that button, and it was just a real frustration. It's not the end of the world, but you know, that could be reconfigured slightly to get that button a little further away from this protrusion. It would be a lot easier to manipulate it if it was. Another minor thing that's more of a complaint than a problem is the charging. Fortunately, you can charge the entire suite of batteries while they're in the camera. There's a charge port here that'll charge the batteries in the grip, and there's a USB-C port here that'll charge the battery in the camera proper. Here's the rub. The USB-C will not charge through into the grip, and the grip will not charge through into the camera. So you literally have to either charge the grip batteries, then switch one of them for the in-camera, and then charge the grip batteries again, or charge the camera, take a battery, charge it, take a battery, charge it, or take two chargers. You see my point? You can't just plug in one charger and it charge all the batteries in the camera. You have to charge the camera one and the grip ones separately. It'll charge them, and it works fine. It's just that it's like they don't have cross. There's something going on in there to prevent that from working that way. And I don't have a complaint about this one. I just have the question: why? Why is that boost switch even on this battery grip? Save the money, take all that off. Wire it internally with a little jumper across where the contact would be for boost, and leave it in boost mode. Just leave it in boost mode, because it only does a couple of things, and they're not very prominent functions that, like, I've never noticed a performance enhancement from running it in boost mode. I leave it in boost mode all the time. It's like it's not even necessary. You could save the money from manufacturing the switch knob, the switch itself, the circuit board contacts, the wire, the printing, you know. I think this is a carryover from the XT2's boost switch, which actually did add a bunch of functionality to the camera. But since they moved all that functionality that the original grip brought to the XT2 into the XT3 proper, this is kind of a wasted switch. It's just there. And I'll find it halfway at times. I'll find it off. And I don't notice any performance difference no matter where it sits. So yeah, they could take that completely out and I don't think anybody would notice. Let's talk about what I do like. I like the form factor. I really like the retro knobs. I like the fact that the knobs are on the surface. All three functions to drive the camera are on the outside. They're easy to access and you know where they are. They're not sub menus, they're not sub dials that do this or that. You don't have to think about it. You know, it's ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Unlike Nikon with the Z6, who puts aperture on the front command dial and ISO on the ring. And I guess it's legacy from the DSLRs that have the G lenses, because the front knob controls the aperture on them. And basically that kind of fell over into their mirrorless game. But for Fuji, you have ISO, shutter speed, and aperture where they should be. And I like that. Some other things I like. I like the exposure comp knob as an external knob. Now, something else I like about it is that it shows on a graphical display in the EVF and on the back of the camera. As you make this change, it changes like the color of the pointer, so you know it's engaged. And it's not just pushing a slider back and forth that's like a 7-segment display or an old LCD display. And if you don't really notice it, you won't see that you're a third of a stop overexposed or something. It turns yellow and you can see it, and it kind of jumps out at you, so you'll know that you're engaging the exposure compensation. I love the film simulation modes. I love Eterna. I love Astria, however you pronounce that. Basically standard. Let's see. It's called. I like Provia, yeah, and I don't use Velvia, but Astia, I like it a lot. I like Provia, Astia, and Eterna. And then of course I like monochrome. I also like the EVF and how sharp and clear it is. That just makes it easy to work with. It also makes it easy so I don't have to use glasses if I'm walking street. I can just put my glasses in my pocket and enjoy the world around me and interact with the camera. And the moment you put it up to your eye, you're looking through an EVF, and it looks really, really good with very little lag. I really like that about this device. But now, in the defense of the rear display, since I've started wearing glasses, I can see the camera while I'm wearing my glasses, so I don't have to look through the EVF to get a sharp image now. And I like the fact that you can kick this out and take low angle photos with it. You can, you know, and it'll flip up, and so you can do down low, or you can flip it down. Get this turned where you can see it, you know, and you can get the overhead shots. You know, I like all of that about it too. But yeah, I like the rear display for high angle shooting, low angle shooting, you know, so I don't have to like lay down on the ground to compose a shot. With the D810, I was kind of obligated to that, or I was just like, try it and hope, you know. And so with this one, I can actually just like squat down. If I want to get a reflection off of a puddle on the street or something like that, I can just kick this display out, get it down low, and just kind of kneel down next to the puddle, and I can compose it and take the shot without having to get down on the ground. That's really handy. I really like that function, and it's fast. Now, there's something to be known about this rear display is from the factory, it'll scratch pretty easy. You can rub it and like scuff it with your fingernail even. It's pretty easy to scratch. So I bought a glass screen protector off of Amazon. It wasn't much, maybe $8 or something. There's a little pack of 2 or 3 of them. And I'm still on the first one, and it has yet to scratch. And it's been on there for months now. So I would highly recommend getting a glass screen protector for the touch display, because the one from Fuji will scratch pretty easily. Something else I like about the battery grip is it'll allow you to put 2 batteries in the grip plus the one in the camera stays, to where some grips don't allow that. Like the Sony one, it's got a plunger that goes up into the camera to make the contact, and you can add the 2 batteries, but you lose the one in the camera. And because of that, you don't get but 1 more battery technically. Now it does give you 2 instead of 1, but with this one I have 3 in the camera, and they all show up on the display right down here at the bottom. You got all 3 batteries right there. so you'll know the status of the internal one, the left and the right grip battery. And you can see it draws off the left grip battery first, then the right one, and then it goes to the internal one. Because of that, I rotate my batteries over time. I'll take them out every so often and move the left one to the one inside the camera, and just kind of move them around so they all get discharged some. But I can shoot all day on these batteries and never have to take them out of the camera, and I've yet to deplete all 3 of them. If I could recommend it, I would always say run it like this, because it's just trouble-free, and you don't have them in your pocket, and you ain't worrying about losing them. It's just great. One thing I wished it did, though, is I wish this screen flipped out to the side or something. I just wished it flipped around where it faced forward so I could vlog with it. I don't film with this camera because of that problem. It's just a hassle, and I just ain't interested in fighting it. Yeah, that's why I use this camera to film with, and I don't film with this camera very much. If I'm filming someone else, this is a great camera, but to do vlogging, it's kind of a pain, so I don't bother to vlog with it. I just shoot still photos. But all in all, this is a great camera that has performed flawlessly over the last year. It does have issues connecting to the app on my phone. If there is a lot of cellular devices in the area, it's like it creates too much interference and it won't connect. But if it gets a little bit quiet, it'll connect and it'll transfer images directly to the phone pretty easily. But yeah, if you're in a high concentration area, like where there's a crowd and a lot of people's cell phones is in use, it'll interfere with it enough that you can't work the app very well. It's kind of a struggle for it. And I haven't updated the firmware in months. I'm sure I'm at least 1 or 2 firmware updates behind. I updated it once or twice, but I know I haven't done the latest one. But it's working, and I really am kind of reluctant to install that firmware when I know this firmware works. Why would I fix something that ain't broke? They're adding functionality to something else, but I haven't seen anything lacking. With the photography I do, it doesn't really matter to me, so I just don't do it. This camera is a great camera, and it's a steal at the price they're selling them at now. They've come way down since last year when I bought it, and now you can get it for pennies on the dollar. This camera is a phenomenal machine that would serve you well. I'm not a real big fanboy of particular brands, but I do like a particular piece of equipment when I find it, and this one works. It just works. So with that, I appreciate you guys suffering through all this with me. This is David, the Georgia photographer, and until next time, get your camera out and go take a picture with it. All right.